Absolutely. Let's get right down to business because we've got one of the best linebackers in the Pac-12 who has entered the transfer portal. There has been talk about and much of what you would look up concerning his name once you spell it correctly and enter it into Google would have him headed toward the Big 12, but the Buckeyes may be in play as well. It's USC linebacker Palaie Gaoteote. Now, I should be way ahead of you guys when it comes to pronunciation, and I am obviously not, just because I've got USC talk on here once in a while, and I have said the name maybe a little bit better in the past, but, I should be all over you guys on this, but I'm apparently not. I think Kevin might be the pronunciation expert when it comes to the USC linebacker and may have the most information as it involves the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah, whatever happened to easy names like Pete Werner and Tuff Borland and things like that. But no, his friends call him EA, so that's what I'm going to call him. But here's my best shot. Palaie Gaoteote is the way that I have it on my pronunciation guide. I've listened to telecasts, and they ramble through it quickly, hoping that they don't mess it up. But to EA, as his friends call him, as I said, I believe Ohio State is very interested in him. You know, they may not come out and overtly say it after the Henry To'o situation and not landing that linebacker who has subsequently transferred to Alabama, but there is mutual interest between EA and Ohio State. It did appear that EA was bound to go to Texas, and now that Ohio State may be kicking the tires here a little bit more, that has seemed to die down the Texas rumors. And, I would expect something to happen pretty quickly if it is going to happen. But, of course, it does create the ripples into the fact of, what does this mean in terms of your triumvirate of Trajan Mitchell and Dallas Gant and Kayvon Pope and some of the young guys. But I think it's a good fit because this is a little bit of a different situation than To'o, who was somebody who was 100 tackle a season type of guy, whereas EA has about 107 tackles over his careers, dealt with some injuries along the way. So I don't think that you would be bringing EA in as a plug-and-place and forget guy and that he would be seeing 60 defensive snaps. I think he's somebody that comes in, provides leadership, provides depth. Oh, by the way, he's Haskell Garrett's cousin as well.
Oh, there you go. Well, that makes a lot of sense then if there's a family tie, because Haskell is obviously a leader on this Ohio State team, and he would certainly bridge the gap for EA to come in and be a contributor right away. I'm looking through. He was at USC. Did he not play? I guess he did play a little bit this past year. Must have been hurt.
2 games.
Yeah, 2 games, 9 tackles this past year. So perhaps as I kind of trying to get ESPN to open up, I guess the year before he had 58 tackles, and the year before that he had 38. So he's been in the past, at least, looks like a mainstay type guy. From Las Vegas, Nevada, 6'2", 250. Yeah, I mean, why not? They missed out on 2020, and so seems to me like they're looking for help. I'm not sure if they know exactly if they want to go with 3 linebackers or 2 linebackers in the bullet or what they want to do. And I think maybe this would help some of their thinking if they're able to get EA into the fold. But again, I'll take a wait and see approach. They've got scholarships. I'm doing the step chart thing, and I'm getting ready to post the defensive side. I posted the offense yesterday on Bucknuts, and my total, I think, was 82 scholarships. JT Tui Mo'Lo'ao, if he comes on, would be 83. And then they would have 2 left to give, maybe 1 to EA, maybe 1 to a walk-on. I don't think the long snapper Robinson is on scholarship. So he was the starter last year. It would make sense if they made him a scholarship player, perhaps, if there's one available. But I guess the point of this is that there are scholarships available, and they have some flexibility. So that is good.
Well, and Ryan Day told us last year or so, or when this was all, the super seniors were announced, that the NCAA was going to allow it. He said he didn't foresee Ohio State getting into that or having a numbers issue this year. And Steve says there are no numbers issues. I haven't really counted them yet because I took Day at his word, but I know they weren't overly. It wasn't the SEC West out there on the Ohio State roster. But another thing, Mark, the reason we're so familiar with EA's pronunciation is because he was an Ohio State recruit, big time recruit, teammates with Tate Martell and Haskell Garrett and Tyjon Lindsey, who are also Ohio State commits. And he was, to me, he would have been the best of the bunch if he had stayed healthy, but he's been injured the last couple of years. You watch him in high school, and he reminded me of Ryan Shazier, the way he just ran around and destroyed people. A bigger, slower version of Ryan Shazier, but everybody's slower than Ryan Shazier. Just a guy who was an impact player for sure, but you look at his career, played in like 2 of their last games last year because he was injured all season, played early on as a sophomore and then got injured again. So I think his game has dipped a bit. I don't know how much because I don't know that we've gotten to see him enough. I know there are some people who are convinced it's dipped a great amount and that he really wouldn't be able to do much for Ohio State and maybe more harm than good by creating some dissension in the locker room. But I like what Kevin said about how he's maybe a 4th guy like Justin Hilliard last year who can do a couple of different things and isn't going to just come in and, Taraja Mitchell, I wrote about him today. He's waited 2 years as a backup in the 2 deep and, 3 years throughout his career just waiting for this day to start. And now if they bring in somebody else to from out of the blue to be like, hey, he's now starting in front of you, that's not going to go over well with that player. It's not going to go over well with the guys who've been training with them. So it's a touchy situation to do this. In the past, when Ohio State has done it, there's been a glaring need. I don't know that there's a glaring need, but it sure feels like the coaches think there is with the way they were going after Henry To'o and now EA Gaoteote. But again, it's interesting how Ryan Day did not like how public Al Washington was or how public that situation was with Tennessee. And now, again, you had another public situation between Al Washington and Tennessee trying to get Henry To'o. And so they need to keep this as undownloaded as you can, but you can't in the Ohio State market. You can't keep it quiet because it's everybody's interested in it. And this was the next logical turn. And when the people in the Texas market are now saying Ohio State, then it's something that everybody talks about. And, the linebackers at Ohio State now have to deal with another guy that is being mentioned to come in and possibly replace one of them.
And let me jump in quick, too. EA was not a new name for this whole situation. Initially, out of the gate, it looked like To'o was going to go to Alabama to begin with. And that Ohio State was really pursuing EA because it probably was running 2nd, 3rd, 5th, what doesn't matter for To'o. And then once things heated up and it seemed that maybe the SEC rules were not going to change or potentially change and that To'o may be the guy, maybe the conversation slowed a little bit with EA. But now that that's off the table, it just seems like it's picked up where it was before. And I agree with Tony that you don't necessarily want this to become front page news if you're Ohio State, but it's just the news cycle that we live in, and it's going to be there. But let's look at Ohio State. Some of their ventures into the portal, they seem to have worked out, and yes, some of them have been much more glaring needs. But going out and getting Justin Fields, Trey Sermon, even a Jonah Jackson, and I think that this is kind of comparable to a Jonah Jackson type of move. Even though Jonah was an inside the Big Ten type of transfer, he was a every down type of starter for them, but it's a guy that you bring in that's been there, who's done it, who brings that type of on the field experience. Even if he's not somebody coming in with 300 career tackles, he does help solidify a unit, even if he is not going to be a focal point.
Well, you guys referenced Ryan Shazier a little bit ago, and I think about Raekwon McMillan as well, and what those guys had in common was they were national top 50, top 100 linebackers. Ohio State has not recruited well at linebacker. I think that's pretty well documented. I mean, they've got some guys coming, obviously, in the years ahead with C.J. Hicks and Gabe Powers and players like that. But, you know, not to disparage anybody that's on the roster, but, you know, Ryan Shazier and Raekwon McMillan aren't walking through that door, and it's been that way for a number of years at Ohio State with the linebacker position. They haven't had all Big Ten, All-American type linebackers. So maybe that is some of the sentiment from the coaches that they wanted 2-0-2-0. They want EA because they know they don't have game changers potentially. How would you know? We've never seen these guys, Gant or Mitchell or Pope or Eichenberg or any of these guys play an actual game, 70 plays in a game. So how would you even know?
Getting back to Kevin's point about EA being one of the first names, I just look back to when because we all write drafts of this guy's coming into the portal, this guy's coming. I wrote my Gaoteote is coming to Ohio State draft on January 20th. So that's about when probably the day he hit the portal is when some of these stories were written. And it's just you put the dots together, and then, as Kevin said, it looked like it went away, and it did. I'm just glad I didn't delete the story yet.
Right.
Well,
I just took my toe story down out of the admin and kind of a little bit more life into my EA story, just because it seemed that things might pick up there. But, you know, again, it's going to be one of those things that it's going to kind of happen in the shadows, and then it's either going to happen or it's not. He's either going to show up in Columbus or Austin. I mean, he's not going back to LA. I'm pretty confident in that one.